Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sometimes Intellectual podcast, where we research and come to talk about politics, ideologies, and philosophies. The topic today is the problem with American politics. Given that we're nearing an election between two controversial candidates and we live in a world where it's incredibly hard to pick and or back any political ideology in public, we thought it'd be a good idea to converse about this. So I'm going to start off today by just mentioning that there might be a little thing wrong with the screen right now, and it's that John's not here. Instead, we have some random named Justin. So Justin is a familiar face that you should get to know each other. Justin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Gian. I appreciate it. My name's Justin, and I'm currently an undergraduate completing my bachelor's degree in biology. And I also currently am employed in the healthcare assistance industry, if you would like to call it that. And I'd like to thank you guys also for giving me the opportunity to speak on this platform.
No problem, man. All right, so we're going to start this off by, I'm just going to ask you all individually, starting with, Nissi, what's your idea? What's your take on this? What do you think is holding the American politics back?
For me, I think right now what's been troubling me for maybe the past 12 or 18 months, I think, is this reluctance to have civil discourse, to hear opinions, to hear different opinions, right? To hear people, there's a lot. And I'm not sure if it's always been like this, but I think right now, I think with a lot that's been happening recently, especially during civil justice. It's
If I may
become.
I add on, interject?
Mhm. No, yeah,
And I think that do you think that morally we can't talk because of our moral beliefs? Like people are believing that you're saying you can't do this because it's unjust, or you can't do this because it's immoral, or would it be ethics or logic?
I think it's more on stubbornness. I think it's people just think that, like, if you don't believe what I do, then you're just incorrect and
Wow,
don't
so
have the
to
right to
complete
say
narrow,
it.
ignorance.
yeah, no. I mean, to narrow it down, I think it's more like if you really want to get into that, I think it's more of an ethics issue,
I think
right? I mean,
it's
there's
maybe.
something fundamentally there's something ethically wrong if, let's say, we have difference of opinion on gun reform, we have difference of opinion on almost on anything, on any political subject, right? I think it's ethically and fundamentally wrong to not be able to not only not want to listen to you, but to label you malevolent, right? To label you
Right. And
right
I
as
think that
as
if have you guys are you guys familiar with ideological subversion? The It's a term that was coined by so one of the KGB operative that came to the United States during the 60s or 70s. I forgot his name. I apologize at the moment, but I'm sure we can attach some sort of information here in the podcast to that if we need be. But he talked about how during the 60s and 70s, during the time of the civil rights as well, that the ideological subversion will be used to change our beliefs on what is morally proper and improper.
and that it
So
would and
with
it would
reality
that
TV,
right, that
ex-
I think, to build on that, that it would take, I think he mentioned something that it would take about a generation to accomplish
yes,
this. Is that correct? Yeah.
a few generations,
Right.
yes,
I definitely
and
agree
it kind
with
of happened quicker than.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I think yeah, I'm familiar with the term. It's really, honestly, it's appalling to me to see, really, and we're watching it every day, especially if you tune into Twitter and social media, right? How our generation just seems to be indoctrinated, right? Um, with certain beliefs, right? With certain right, certain notions of how the world should work,
For sure, I
right?
think
And
it. I think it.
yeah.
The biggest problem for me with the politics system currently is that everyone thinks it's black and white. Like the
Mhm.
whole two party system, I definitely think that's a problem. Like, flashing back to the little mini podcast we posted, all of us said that we're, like, either don't like to identify ourselves with any kind of standpoint on politics, like liberal, conservative, or anything, just because it's incredibly difficult for someone who to be able to 100% agree with something, because I personally don't like to be complacent. Like, I don't want to.
Yeah,
I
because
agree with
they'll
some things.
categorize you.
Yeah, I agree with some things like Republicans say, but I also disagree with some things. I agree with some things that, like, any other thing says. Like, I can't be fully liberal. I can't be fully
Would you say
conservative.
that it's hard to be respected or to gain respect
Oh, for sure. Because
due to these?
once you choose a side, you're basically, with the current climate in the world, you're basically saying that I'm only looking to meet and speak with people that are on my side. it's incredibly biased that we live in a world where like you refuse to speak or listen to anything about any other ideology. Like I've met tons of people like transitioning from living in mainly like Latino population to a big like in-state city where everyone is just different. Like the culture shock of getting to meet new people that are like literally the first things that they'll say is like, oh, what do you believe in? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, it's because I can't, like, I don't like talking to people who are conservative, or I don't like talking to people who are liberal. Like, why do we choose to shut ourselves off from other people with different ideologies instead of learning what makes them tick and learning why there's such an incredible difference in what we believe, why we believe? Because it's incredibly personalized.
I think Will,
just to emphasize on that real quick, I think that is like the first step into having a completely brainwashed society. People not being willing to engage in reasonable and intellectual conversation. Like that is something that you need as a society in order to progress. And I think that when you start limiting yourself and your horizons because you simply believe that someone's ideology either makes them a fascist or a
not even that,
communist.
people are scared as well.
Yeah, but to be quite frank, I understand the concept of fear within the current political climate. I get it. However, I think that you also need to be willing to put yourself in a position in which you risk that to have decent conversations. And to be quite frank, I don't think that either side at the moment pushes for that. I think that the current political climate is an entire facade created on the concept of having both of these demographics try to shut each other up. And I think that is what's wrong with society.
Well, absolutely, because it's no longer a joke when we say like, oh, you have to pick your poison. Like it's literally like there's no matter who or what you pick, you are picking something that some people are going to suffer from. Like there is no way that you can make a perfect decision.
Yeah. It was funny because I was gonna ask you guys. I was recalling. Have you guys ever seen any depiction in iconography, media shows, or anything that have depicted how our political climate is? And it all kind of happened in 2016. Everyone was, as soon as Donald Trump was elected, you instantly heard, "Not my president, not my president. Who's that guy?" They're all making fun of, and then you have the Republicans who are talking down to the blue. So it was just a series of unfortunate events, and really sad to see how our society has come to this and this current standing.
I think before you immediately judge a candidate or a person, not saying that I favor Trump or that I'm a Trump supporter, because I personally am not, but I think you need to, before establishing judgment and being like, oh, you support a blank person, well then you don't have the right to speak. You need to get to know why they support that person, what makes them tick, and if they are wrong or uneducated, then you need to politely and in a civilized manner educate them and talk to them about like, hey, well, have you seen like most of the evidence that lies out there? Because a lot of people like to data skew and be like, oh, well, there's 50 billion confirmed studies that this is happening, but I'm gonna stick to the one report that said that like this is happening. Like I guess I understand why you want to believe that, but you need to see both sides of the picture. And it's incredibly like, what's the word? I keep wanting to say discriminative, but I know it's not that. It's prejudice.
It's
prejudice.
You're judging. It's preconceived notions. It's a lot of things. It's unfortunate.
It's incredibly prejudiced and unfair to label every single person of any group. Like you cannot say that like every liberal is the same. You cannot say that every Republican is the same. You cannot say that every conservative is the same, because they're not.
That's where I think things are different now. That's where I think right now there is a divide. Right now that you could say every liberal kind of, not that I'm saying it, but I'm saying people are able to now freely say liberals are the same, because there's the liberals in an example is like in California currently going on with all the guns and all. They're all wanting guns now, and then they all didn't want guns before, and that's what's really funny to hear. And it's sad that people don't say, hey, let them have their guns, let the people change their opinion. They're seeing the right way, and the right way is I guess you can say the truth, because at the end of the day,
that's very surface level to think like that. To think that like, because I grew up like that. I grew up being told that like when I didn't know anything before I studied like politics and did my research, I was told that like Republican and Democrat, like the way you choose between them is whether you support abortion or not. And I was like, okay, well, I do or don't, and then that would decide like, oh, I'm this side, I'm this side. But there's so much
Yeah.
more to it, because on
Exactly.
on a ground level, there is something that like, oh, you believe in this, well, then you're probably more inclined to this. Like if you believe in pro-choice, you're probably going to be a liberal. But there's so much more to liberalism than just that.
Correct.
So you can't just like identify yourself with a whole ideology just because you agree with one point, because then you're
Exactly. And
you're
that's
missing the
why-
whole
and that's-
point.
That's everything wrong with the two-party system.
Yeah.
That is everything wrong with it.
Yes.
The singular fact that there's only 2 representatives for however many eligible voters there is within the United States is preposterous. The singular
Yeah,
fact that
and-
you pick between 2 people who, by the way, have almost no differing ideologies, just differing parties,
Well,
is
I'm
quite
gonna-
frankly ridiculous.
But here's where I think I have to fundamentally disagree. Is that I'm gonna challenge that take, because
Go for
I
it.
think, okay, the thing is that Democratic and Republican are umbrella terms.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think so. For example, like let's look at the most recent Democratic primary, where you had Bernie Sanders, who was a Democratic socialist, a progressive, right, a populist, someone on the populist left, who is very obviously right differential from Joe Biden, who's more of a moderate center left politician, right? So again, the term Democrat, the party Democrat, there is obviously branches. I mean, I believe it was AOC who actually said that, you know, in any other country in the world, Joe Biden and I would not be in the same party. So I think I agree where I agree fundamentally that and with the sentiment of Ed that, you know what, like the term the two-party system has lingering effects and consequences on our political system, but it still functions in a form of where there is ideological freedom, right? When you have Congressman Omar, Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Justin Amash, right, a libertarian. Then you have your more, particularly in the House, where you see your more vocal Republicans like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, right? There is ideological splits, and it isn't. I don't believe that on paper the system may be binary, but when you examine the individuals, right, in the legislature, in both the House and in the Senate, there is very thorough ideological differences. I mean, it isn't binary. It's, if anything, it's a lot more spreadsheet, right? So, I think that, again, what would you have to say to that? But that's
Right.
my
I
again,
just think
that's how I
that
perceive it.
And back to where it leads us, it is unfortunate that people do have to people are falling to that surface level that you were saying, Gian, that people are limiting themselves and understanding that it can be more complex, and that's where the power comes back to the people.
What
But
the thing
may
is,
not-
yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, but I think, again, just to really build on that, I would argue that, again, from a real surface level perspective, yes, the system is binary. However, again, if individuals took the time to say examine the candidates, right, even going back to 2016, right, when the Republican Party, where you had more moderate, more libertarian candidates, right, Rand Paul, right, even to some degree, and right, so you had the libertarian aspects of like Rand Paul, and then you had like the very right firm conservatives like Ted Cruz, and then you had like the populist right and Donald Trump. There are ideological differences here, right? And I think people can perceive that. Now, do they? That's an entirely different question, right?
I believe that another reason as to why the perception isn't there is because the main party system has done a fantastic job of trying to squash these ideologies. So you see people like AOC, Bernie Sanders, Ron and Rand Paul, Justin Amash. They are very clearly not stemming from these like direct party ideologies. They are obviously third partiers who basically have to conform themselves to these main parties in order to get a singular vote. They have to conform
Right.
themselves to these parties to even make a difference
Right.
within Capitol Hill, which
Right.
is a conversation of its own. However, they are thorns on the side of the institution, and the institution is doing everything it can to squash them and make sure that they can say nothing when it comes to speaking out against the system. And I think that is everything that is wrong with the system at hand. The fact that it tries to squash these stemmings that create more individuality and that can really relate to more of the average Americans. And instead, you have this system that's pushing this ideology that's like, if you're not Republican or Democrat, you're wasting a vote and you're wasting your time because your candidate will never win. And I think that is inherently awful. Like, it's just bad.
It's definitely wrong, but I do think that there is some truth in that. And hold on, I'm sorry, I phrased it wrong. I think it's true right now, and the fact that it is true is wrong because, like, currently, a couple of days ago or last week or something, like, Kanye announced his running for presidency, and I think it is true that, like, if you vote for Kanye, it's basically you're voting for Trump. Because
you guys believe in predictive programming?
because Trump supporters are not going to switch. Trump supporters are Trump supporters to the end. Joe Biden supporters are mainly just people who don't like Trump and don't have another option, so they have to vote for Biden. So those people are going to be incredibly easy to sway to be like, Kanye now. So now there's going to be a split between Trump having 50%, and now instead of Biden having 50%, it's now 50, 25, 25, and Trump easily wins.
No, I think,
and just the fact that that's happening is like, there is a problem there.
After you, Nissi.
Who do you, real talk, real quick question, and I know it's strays, but who do y'all think that Kanye's cabinet would be?
I really don't care.
Yeah. Oh, dude, can you guys imagine having like an entire country like ran by rappers, like an all musician?
I don't think they'd be rappers; they'd be his producers.
Yo, bro.
No, forget that. Imagine the Kardashians as the first lady.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think the main question, like, not straying anymore. The main question that we need to ask is, like, not to just be cynical and be like, oh, there's a problem. Like, how do we fix this? What is the first step in fixing what is fundamentally wrong with the system currently?
Are you asking me, or are you asking like?
Well, I'm asking all of you. But sure, if you want to go first.
The thing is, look. So I'm gonna look. First and foremost, with the three of you, or mostly Ed and Gianfranco. I'm not sure if Justin. I can align Justin on this sentiment, but you guys seem to forget that parties like are ideologically diverse, right? And they also they also ideologically shift.
Because if I may add, where does the contradiction in that for me is that they're both interested in taking away individual rights, and that's an aspect that has been discussed in philosophical views in the past. Postmodernist or modernist, whichever one you take on it. They're both interested in limiting the individual rights, even though the Constitution was made for individual rights and the Bill of Rights as well. An example is like, I mean, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act is one of them.
Violation of the Fourth.
Partially, to an extent, it's just Patriot Act kind of is guilty by association or guilty until proven innocent by investigation that you will be unaware of as well. So that's also where some things that are contradictory to what lead us to stick to the surface, sadly, back to that, yeah.
Sure, but back to my question, how do we fix it? What's the first step? What do you guys think is the first step in order to fix a broken system?
We need to stop feeding
contributions.
Yep.
Specifically, though.
The system.
Vetting contributions, I think it would help it a lot. Understanding what these contributions are, no lexical ambiguities. A lot of lexical ambiguities go on in politics a lot. It's like, do you guys know what lexical ambiguities?
No.
It's like if the cops come around for someone that has a warrant and they say, "Hey, you know where Jimmy is?" And then Jimmy's in your attic, but you didn't see him go up the attic, so you say, "No, I don't know where Jimmy is." And it's like saying truth. You're being honest, but lying.
Wait, I'm confused. How does this correlate?
There's a lot of lexical ambiguities that go on, like political contribution-wise. Like if you want to use, back to where it ties to privatization of part of the federal government and also privatization of public things, that those people that are giving money, so to speak, albeit whoever it may be, pharmaceutical, agricultural, any kind of thing, any kind of body that's subsidizing something, there's a promise and incentive to that, and they expect something in return. And I think that having that understanding of what they expect in return for that contribution or whatever it may be would help it, and defining it, because people don't really define it. And that's why people have those terms, vague terms or phrases, backdoor meetings, and then they make that's where the conspiracy theories choose to veer away from in reality and just make themselves comfortable with what they may assume.
Yeah, I like what
to-
he said. However, I think you just need to stop feeding the system, like wholeheartedly. Like here's the reality of
Well,
it.
how would you stop feeding the system?
You stop voting, you stop supporting the system as a whole. And when I say this, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from voting. If that's what you believe will change the system, then you do so. You do what you believe in.
Believe that if people were
I
to
think
stop
there's a step
voting,
before that,
whoever
though.
Listen, man,
wins
I think that a small thorn in the system can go a long way. I think that
Indeed.
5% of the population voting for a third party and getting that third party federal funding and allowing that third party to take its course within Capitol Hill can make a ginormous difference within a system that is dominated by two
What
parties.
happens when that federal funding, upon like permission or granting of it, they're gonna say that while the people may believe it and back it up because they're elected, what happens if they're not subsidized? If they're denied?
Elaborate.
What happened if a party is like denied? What if someone, let's just vaguely, I'm being vague, someone starts a party, their instant chant is for the people, by the people.
And they get
then
5% of the national votes.
let's just say some people like that, kind of what's going on in Chaz, like all those autonomous things. Let's say that parties like that happen, not even rebellious or anything. People get there politically, and they're able to take over or make their own. Not a coup, because coups are completely rebellious. It's wrong. That's immoral. But like, if people were to genuinely gain power, what point does that power exert itself over the government? When is it not enough for you? Like,
okay, I feel like that conversation itself, we can't even have that conversation until we put a stop to the system.
yeah, and that's what's sad because people don't know
but
what to say.
the thing is that where I just strongly and vigorously disagree is that, actually, let me raise this question first. Ted, do you believe that since the inception of this country that the two party, well, first and foremost, the first president of the United States was actually against parties, so I'll give you that.
Smart man.
Right, so I'll give you that. However, my question is, do you believe that since the inception of a two-party system, right, or since the rise of the two-party system, right, and what it's perpetuated, do you believe that it's been fruitful or not?
I think it's been complete garbage, and I actually don't even believe in parties. I don't believe that the system should function on the concept of parties. I think that the only way to dismantle parties is by taking a stepping stone and adding more parties to keep these other parties in check.
Honestly,
I think that if you want to keep parties, that is the only way to do it.
Honestly, I think you just entertained a thought I had. Like, what if we, just think about it. And live in a world where, hypothetically, oh god, I'm gonna start selling Ben Shapiro. If we didn't have parties, and we just had like individuals, like instead of running as a party, you run as a person, and you get judged on your ideals and your policies instead of being judged as like Republican, Democrat. Like, just, I don't like what you say, so I'm not gonna vote for you.
But here,
would that?
Listen, the
what
concept
about
of
factions? Like,
the concept of factions is iffy because factions will always exist within society. However, I think that the concept of a lot of widespread factions is a lot better than having only two parties to choose from that inherently feed the system anyways.
Are you an elitist? Ed, are you an elitist? Are you an elitist?
No, I love people.
Speaking of, Ed, I agree with like the step of like we need to stop supporting the system by like not voting or whatever. But I do think that there's a step before
voting
that.
for parties that aren't mainstream.
I think it's incredibly like you're assuming a lot by saying that like the people are even going to want to do that, because I think the first step is to have people educated and to have people actually change the way they view argumentation. Because humans are incredibly strange in the fact that we're so easy to persuade, but we're also incredibly stubborn.
Down to a step-by-step basis, it just goes educate the masses, allow the masses to think for themselves, incorporate more parties into the system, and give the masses intellectual diversity within these polls.
There's
I'm gonna
already
steal-
intellectual diversity. What you need to
Oh, yes.
introduce is the ability to distinguish when it's okay to argue and when it's okay to not, and how to do so in the way that you're not being dismissive towards other ideologies. You should be allowing yourself to be educated on things that you may not necessarily agree with. That's like the whole reason we started this podcast, is because we
I agree.
differentiate in
walking away
ideas.
from each other like either I'm right or you're wrong. Like
Yeah.
they're either.
But I don't think that's the fault of a two-party system.
No, that's the fault. Oh, what do you believe it's the fault of, Nissi? If I may, because you weren't able to talk previously.
I mean,
believe
okay,
you were
the
gonna
thing
say-
is, for this to be true, it has to be applied. It has to be true back in. Okay, so for example, this truth that we are putting forward, right? That a two-party system is the reason for a faulty intellectual discourse, for faulty intellectual ideologies being
And I think-
fragmented. Here, the thing is, for that to be true, does it apply? A century ago? Does it apply 2 centuries ago?
And that's where I think that's where things get controversial, because that's where controlled opposition comes into play, because there are people from opposite sides of each party that are putting their own insiders to corrupt the ideas of that party, and that alone is also kind of one of the sad things.
Can you
Full
repeat
of
that one
emotions
more
over
time?
here.
Can you repeat that one more time? What you
I
just
think
said.
I think that that's where kind of controversial things come into play, where the idea that you, like you say, there's surface level, and staying at the surface level is where you believe that the two-party system is perfect. And when you dive down, you learn that there's more things that go on behind the pictures. I mean, there's also there's counterintelligence between them, and then there's also the controlled opposition aspect, that opposite parties will put their own individuals in play of the other party to corrupt the ideas of that party. So it's another sad thing.
So really, to build on that, I think what you just described was Donald Trump.
Well, not really. I mean, it's funny because it actually happens with the left as well. Right now, with that previous investigators, all the private investigators they've been trying to do for the Russian case and the meddling in the election, all those other ones,
But we're talking about who's at the pedestal and who's at the front of these parties. So, for example, in 2016, right, when they asked, I'm not sure which debate it was, right, but I remember clearly where they asked the candidates, who here would consider a third party run if they weren't the Republican nominee, and Donald Trump, proudly raised his hand, and he was the outlier of the group, right? So again, and now what we have now, right, is Donald Trump really what we've seen is the rise of Trumpism, right? Where this is no longer the Republican Party of vote. It's not even the Republican Party of 2012.
I think that's
right?
that's where I believe that's where, if I, not to you but to people who are also where you're arguing in benefit of it, like that idea that you're arguing, if I may, that's always happened. That's with George Bush and the Patriot Act, and with Barack Obama and his arms deals that he's doing with Yemen. It's always happened with presidents. They've always gone into office making these promises, and then when they get there, they end up doing these things that are contrary.
Well, let's be honest. The Patriot Act was as a result of 9/11.
Yeah, that's true, 100%. But it's just sad that a lot of people had to endure the scrutiny that they went through. That's why we're speaking about it. Not so much that it's immoral. It's just the ways that they. Pardon?
No, well, the thing is about every president has had to endure scrutiny.
Yeah. No, not the presidents. It's the people, and that's what's really weird. Because it's funny, because our government is in power for the betterment of our society and for the protection and safety of our people. Which everything that they've been doing has been the contrary. Which is not so much the contrary verbatim, but it's been little by little. They're making us guilty until we prove ourselves to them our innocence.
Well, to kind of bring back Ed into the fold, I want to contest. I raised the question earlier, and I didn't get to build on it. But right, Ed. So, do you believe that? And perhaps you already answered that, but I don't recall what your answer was. That the two-party system has been fruitful since its inception, since the two-party system rose.
You'd have to define fruitful.
Has it been beneficial to society in any way?
I think the two-party system has done a fantastic job of dividing society, to be quite honest.
I think it's benefited society,
but
definitely.
that's more. Well, hang on. That's more of like, okay. So again, I think that's You're not answering the question. Okay, so has it
No,
benefited
it's a
society or not?
no. It's a no. Yeah, I don't think it's benefited society at all. No.
Not one. You can't provide one example where it has benefited society.
I mean,
Because
I
I
think
can
I think
think
you
of
have to take
several.
into
Right? You can
consideration
think of.
what you consider benefit. Because if you consider benefit
Yeah.
like an
Well, we can argue.
an ignorant masses and a like slumbering
So you mean
unconsciousness.
so when you say benefit, I would assume you're talking about like maybe policy-wise, policy that might change people's lives. So I guess a good example would be the legalization of gay marriage, which was spearheaded by the Democratic Party, even though the reality of it was that their primary candidate didn't really run on that. Okay, but whatever. We'll just assume that
No,
that,
look,
that
let
didn't
me build on
happen.
it.
They
So allow me to
wait,
build
no,
on
no, no,
it.
no, no. Let me finish. They spearheaded gay marriage, right? That they got it done. They got gay marriage done, and it was contested by the Republican Party, by a party that is being fed by the system that, at the same token, is feeding the same system that keeps the Democrats in power within their own prospective ideologies. They're both feeding into the same system, utilizing that system to their own advantage, and they look fantastic doing it in the eyes of the day-to-day person. But the reality of it is they're two sides of the same coin. So I just don't understand how there's any beneficiaries from either or of their policies when they're both feeding into a system that basically pits these ideologies against each other and forces them to make each other look bad in order to scour more votes from the population.
That's kind
A
of
few
Okay,
good
well,
the
look,
deeds,
the
two
thing,
wing,
but here's
different
a few
wings,
good deeds from a party
same bird.
does not mean that the system is okay. If that was the logic, if that was the reasoning, then that would make Donald Trump a decent president since he's done one or two good things decently within his term. That's not You're not supposed to look
I
at
mean,
the
he's done
system.
some decent.
Okay, no. So the thing is, I think that something that Ed forgets, right, or just leaves out of the argument is that the two-party system has proven fruitful results, right? Which is why I'm going to steal Mana's position. For example,
Mhm.
right, and let's try to avoid the entire notion of or the entire topic of these parties switched. Okay, let's just look at primarily. Let's tunnel how a two-party system has been beneficial, right? It was an overwhelming Republican Party that spearheaded the abolishment of slavery, right? We can look at also women's suffrage, right? We can look at establishment of the Federal Reserve, which is done
And
by Congress.
Going back to that question of like benefit, like if it benefited or not, I think you also have to consider the fact that you have to define what benefiting is. Because I have 2 points on this, and they're quick points. So I'll say them quick. First of all, if you consider benefit like a ignorance in the collective unconscious of society, well then yeah, you're benefiting because no one knows any better. So technically, that could be considered a benefit, even though that's inherently wrong. Second, you also have to take in consideration all the numbers, because like sure, taking like the last three presidents into account, like Trump has done some good things, but that doesn't mean that discounts all the bad things, and neither does that discount the good things. Same with Obama, you can't discount the good things for the bad, and same with Bush, you can't discount the bad things for the good. You have to take everything into consideration, and it's like Ed said, it's an impact calculus. Do the benefits outweigh the cons? Because you can't just say it benefited because he did 3 things out of 20 that are beneficial, because in net gain, that's a net decrease. You need to take everything into consideration and honestly decide, like, yes, he did some good things, he did some bad things, and he being not like a specific person, he has like the position of the president. He did some good things, he did some bad things, but ultimately, was this a success? Was this what we wanted?
And to add on to that, people need to also give themselves that power that they know. They're kind of, people are settling right now for retrospect. They expect us to be able to put people in power, and hey, whatever goes awry, we can look at it in retrospect, and it is what it is. But they can stop that, and that's where the two-party system can make a difference as well. While it may seem that it may not, but it can.
Okay, yeah. So where I fundamentally disagree with Ed is I think that you are given like a variety of ideological positions and candidates. That's exactly why the Democratic primaries are for and the Republican primaries are for. Right. So in all honesty, it's what you are giving these ideological differences. You're given an option, right? It's not like the Republican Party is just throwing you Donald Trump and saying, okay, this is our candidate, right?
For sure. But I think
there's a state.
I think
There's a state by state. Well, the thing is, you can say that. You can say it might as well happen. But for example, before South Carolina, it was just almost it seemed like Bernie Sanders was on the path to was on the path to being the Democratic nominee, right? So you might have had that sentiment. Well, just let it happen, right? Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee until we got to South Carolina, where we saw this complete shift, right, from progressive left to more of like a center left moderate position, right? So things change, right? This isn't right. The entire campaign, the campaigns in general, right, is a process, right? So Ted Cruz, for crying out loud, won Iowa in 2016, right? So you are giving again options, and then yes, their umbrella,
Yeah.
Well, we're
Yeah,
not
they're-
arguing
yeah,
with the
exactly.
fact
I
that
think
you're
that,
given
that's very true. That I'm sorry, you go ahead. Gian.
you're not given the we're not arguing that you're given options. Like the options have always been there. None of us are negating the fact that there are options. We're saying that the fact that there are umbrellas is inherently wrong because they're so diverse and they're so broad in the way that there's only two of them or two main ones. There's only like Republican and Democrat. No one is able or no one should be able to, or very few, because I can't just generalize like that. Very few people are going to be able to 100% agree with any standpoint, and by labeling themselves, they're being complacent in the fact that they're gonna have to agree with things they don't agree with. And to add on top of that, in the society that we live in currently, it's incredibly difficult to publicly back any specific ideology because you're gonna get roasted and you're gonna get outcasted.
It's not so much that you're roasted; it's that we will feel ridicule. But you,
yes, ridicule, and the fact that like some people are gonna look at you and be like, "I don't even want to talk to you because you don't believe in the things I believe," and some people will say that, and it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
the inherent problem isn't that we're not given options. It's that the options are not viable ones. That we're not allowed to pick what we believe in. We're allowed to pick between two things.
Yeah, and to add on to that,
But hang on. The thing is, Gianfranco, is that do you honestly believe that you should agree unanimously with a candidate?
Yes.
Yes,
But that's a very I'm sorry.
If I want someone leading this country, I want it to be someone who I can 100% confidently say.
I will take a third
mass
party
population,
over
population.
Donald Trump or Diet Donald Trump any day of the week. And
No,
that is simply because
well,
these generalizations of the ideology have done a fantastic job of silencing these quote-unquote thorns at the spine of the system. People like Amash, the Pause, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and any other more progressive or libertarian candidate have completely been silenced by the main system and have been told either keep your mouth shut or you can forget about votes. That is the issue. And we have conformed to this system. That's the problem. We've been satisfied by it.
That's when they released that kind of ties into, if I may, the controversial things that when they started speaking out, while some facets of the political atmosphere may be controlled, which I may say freely they are, but like when people do try to tell the people, inform them that you have the power to make a change, you don't just have to choose us. They kind of say that, like you were saying with AOC and Ilhan Omar, telling you that you can make a change in the system, but we're controlled not from us. They kind of say arbitrarily that.
There's an implied like you can make a change in the system, but only if it's the change that we see fit.
Yeah. It's the normal.
I'm sorry, hang on, but that's exactly what Ed is saying.
Yes.
That's the exact same radical notion.
Well, no, it's that.
Is it really radical though? Is that really radical?
How is it not radical?
I just wanted to say that to point a thing out because I think we strayed a little bit. But going back to when you asked me like, do you believe that a candidate of the president you should be able to 100% agree with? And I said yes. I said that, but that doesn't mean that I believe it's realistic. I understand that I'm not going to. I understand that I'm not going to be able to 100% agree with a candidate, but I'm saying that I'm okay with not 100% agreeing with a candidate. Although I want to be able to 100% agree, but I shouldn't have to rope myself into any title just because I kind of align with a certain ideology.
All of us are a result of having to settle for that exact, like you too, Nissi. All of us are so you not to argue with you, brother, but like we are all results of this failed system. Like we're all not wanting to conform to these parties. So changing the system.
But your voices aren't suppressed. There's a write-in ballot for a reason. It's not like
suppressed.
These
It's
people
not
are
that
holding.
they're suppressed. It's that you're gonna get far enough to make a change, and you're gonna hear. You're only gonna affect enough people to
finish.
evoke. Pardon. Yeah, go ahead.
the thing is that, like, okay, so for example, back on the premise of that you have to unanimously agree with a candidate for them to be your ideal choice, I fundamentally disagree with.
I agree.
Second, you have a write-in. There's a write-in option for a reason. No one's holding a gun to your head, telling you to vote for Donald Trump.
You have to recall, you have to keep in mind that right now in this election that's going on right now, as a standpoint that's probably going to keep happening, remember that there's two candidates that are both wish-washy, and that if you don't vote for one, you're just splitting the vote and you're giving it to the other one. So even if you write if you write someone who you 100% agree with and you write in someone, that's not going to win. I personally don't believe, or I believe there's a 99% possibility that a write-in will lose, because you're just splitting the vote and giving more votes to the other side.
Yeah, man. Historically,
and I'm looking at the data right now. The most popular third party in America, the Libertarian Party, has ever achieved is 3% of the vote, dude. They only need 5 to get federal funding.
But you know why? No one. But the thing is, no one shares these views.
Silenced. Most people are more libertarian than they realize, but those views are being silenced.
Okay, so just let me get this across. Okay,
sure.
Most people are moderates. Most people don't have an ideological position. Okay, the loudest voices.
And wait, you have to separate that. Nissi, like, do you think that they don't have a position because they don't know enough, or is it because they choose not to be due to
they have a position to both. It's both. You can't tell me that society isn't disgusted, right, with the plethora of just really just two parties that what I would put forward is because of Donald Trump have just been acting completely irrational, right?
Exactly, so but it's not really like we're in a position to change.
It's not just because of him, though.
I would argue. I stray from Ed's point of view here. I don't believe that it's because we're silenced. I think I'm ready to vote for a third party if I wanted to. But the problem is that statistically, I can't do it. Because the same thing with Kanye. It's the same thing with Kanye. If I vote for anyone other than Trump or Biden, I am removing a vote that is because the third party is not going to win.
To cut you off. I think personally, John, I think that's partially what the issue is with the system. The fact that you believe, no, bro, I encourage you to vote third party if that's what you want. Because at the end of the day, this third party only needs 5% of the freaking votes to get federal funding.
Well, that's what the rules say. But remember that we live in a time where the government doesn't always do what they're supposed to do. So what if you do that and they just don't?
But that's we can't even have that conversation until one of these parties actually gets the votes. So I understand.
Because it's kind of a thing like when we get there. Oh, so now what do we do now?
And then what?
Yeah, man. Like we got to get there first, bro. We're on the road right now.
I'm not sure. I don't think. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you have anything to say before I hop on that? Or
yeah, I just think listen. I understand the sentiment of believing that you're throwing away a vote by voting for anybody that's not a part of the main system. But at the end of the day, I think that it's just preposterous at this point to believe that you can change the system from voting with it. If you believe that voting out of the system is better for the populace than sticking to the same machine, then you should do so. Because at the end of the day, believe it or not, your vote does matter. It really matters. So
it does.
So I just have trouble resonating that a fragmented parties would just be more fruitful.
Yeah, bro, just get rid of parties.
But how so? But the thing is that here's the thing about this is that if you have, for example, let's say that hypothetically, okay, we had, a 10-party system, right? And we have a 10-party election, okay, and one party comes out on top with 17% of the vote, right? The other 9 parties got like 2%, 4%. You want a party with 17% of the population to dictate the remaining 83%. That to me is absolutely ludicrous. Kind of for your position to be valid, it has to be valid also here. So, and that's where I think it's faulty. It's best for a 2-party system because when you have umbrella, right? When you have ideological, right? Everyone under umbrella, right? You have ideological positions umbrella. It helps. It helps because then you do see where the part. That's the entire reason why parties shift, Right? Parties are sometimes center right, center left, or they shift progressive. Prior to 2019, it seemed like, damn it, why'd you have to do?
The discussion's been really fruitful, to use your words, because
Yeah, 'cause we
none
can
of us
all resonate.
wavered. I think it's pretty good that we're all able to discourse here and be able to, like, I don't think any of us 100% agreed with each other, but we were still able to, like, respectfully discourse and, like, share stuff and be able to speak on different matters. I think that's the whole point. I think we succeeded in doing what we wanted to do here. So just to wind things down, I know we probably could keep talking about this for hours. So for you, the viewer or the listener, I guess, if you really want to hear more about this, let us know, DM us, tell us in the comments. Like, we want another like a part 2 of this podcast, and we'll do it. But we're almost running out of time, so we're gonna start winding down here. Any last thoughts?
I mean, just really. A closing statement from Ed? Again,
from all closing statement.
I wasn't
from all.
able to. I have never heard a conversation this good. I mean, I've never had a conversation with colleagues like this, that we were able to have the discourse, as you said, because it was pretty fun. I mean, sadly I have to say this: I've never met a liberal that's so cool. Because usually people nowadays.
No. I think like I like classic liberal, I guess is the term. But the thing is, now these days, liberal falls under like.
I've never met a blue. I've never met that someone was still able to talk, like able to speak about because blue, if I may, is compassionate. You guys have empathy. The way the conservative is keeping the traditional ways, kind of, it's cool to meet someone that's able to be progressive and be knowledgeable and intellectual about it. Because a lot of progressives nowadays are trend people, influencers, just people who are following trends. You know,
yeah,
posting
man.
black
And
squares.
Just to conclude on my end, like, I think that the current system, it kind of reminds me of like cafeteria food. Like, I think it's in on paper it's supposed to be good and beneficial, and you're supposed to gain something from it. But the reality of it is, once you walk in and actually eat it, it's just fucking disgusting.
Hey,
Amen.
it's enough to get you to next period, bro.
That was a perfect analogy.
No, man, nothing is as dangerous as labeling yourself a Republican in the status quo, bro.
Dude, no. On that,
Sorry,
I mean, it's you know the type of like animosity someone gets for just saying like I'm a Republican.
All right, well, we can talk about this
really,
later. We're kind of running out of time, so if you enjoyed, please let us know. Please leave a like, or if you're listening on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe, comment. If you're listening on any other platform that we may have already, if you're listening in the future, make sure to follow us on Instagram at sometimes_intellectual, and our Twitter, which will be coming out soon, so it's hear about that in the next podcast. But yeah, make sure to leave a comment if you want more, or DM us on Instagram if you can't comment on the platform you're on. But it's pretty good. All right, so thank you for tuning in to Sometimes Intellectual, and we'll catch y'all next time. Thanks for listening.